Ooh, that's loud. I'm okay now. You know, it's interesting because I'm a little bit out of my comfort zone here. Mandy, we were eating breakfast or something, and she said that she might have a speaker that might have to cancel. And I says, well, what is it? What's the speaking engagement? She said TED, and I says, I know a couple of TEDs. I'll speak in front of TED. And I wasn't sure what she was talking about. And I said, well, what's the subject? And I don't hear very well. I'm supposed to wear hearing aids. And I thought I heard her say something about don't catch small things or something like that. And I thought, well, I can do that. I don't catch small things. I'm a fly fisherman, and so I can talk about that subject. And so I got here today, and she said I'm supposed to write some bio thing about, the subject. And so I told her how I love to fly fish and sent her a big thing. It was about 5 pages long about how I enjoy fly fishing. And she said I only needed a paragraph, so I kind of shortened it down a little bit. And I got here, and I saw the topic was, I thought it was about, catching things, not small. So I'm a little out of my comfort zone, so I brought my fly rod, and I was going to talk about fly fishing. Is there any fly fishermen in the room, or women? Oh, good. Then we'll just talk to you. This is a fly rod. And when I was a very young kid, my father was a truck driver, and we lived in Idaho. And when he'd get home after his runs, he would go get me and my brother, and he'd take us up to the rivers up in southwestern or eastern Idaho, and he would take us fishing. And he had something like this. It was a bamboo pole, and he would give us a can of worms and some eggs, some salmon eggs, and he taught us how to use those, and some little Zebco poles, and he would take us over to a spot, and he'd say, okay, you fish here, and then he'd go off in the distance, and he would take his fly rod, something like this, and he would start fishing. And we would fish, and my brother and I, we would get excited, and we'd catch a few fish, and then we'd go chase the frogs and the snakes. And then what I found myself doing after an afternoon was going over and just sitting in the grass and watching my father just cast his line. And I was very mesmerized with the concept of fly fishing. And, I would watch my dad, and one time I asked him, I go, how do you do that? And he says, well, it's really simple, DeMarr. He says, all you need to do is learn a couple of techniques, and you can learn how to do it too. And so as I was growing up, I learned those techniques, and I started to fly fish too, just like my father did. And I was in high school. I was teaching swimming lessons during the summer. And what I would do, I'm going to put this down right here for a minute. What I would do is after work, about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, do we have that timer thing? I've never spoken in my life for less than at least 30 minutes. So does that tell me how much time I have left?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Scared me for a minute. And so what happened was that I would, when I was in high school, I used to just go in the afternoons, and after I'd go to work, I'd run up into the rivers of Utah, and I'd go and fly fish until it was dark. Did it every day, almost every day. And I just loved, and I had a passion for fly fishing. I loved it. And, most people, kids my age, they like motorcycles and trucks and cars and girls. And don't get me wrong, I like that too. But what my real passion was to go fly fishing. I loved it. I wanted to be a fly fisherman. I remember listening to my dad's story. He grew up in Oregon. I remember listening to his stories of how he used to fish the Deschutes River, and how he would go up into Washington and fish the Columbia River, and how he would go into Idaho and fish the Salmon River, and hit the headwaters of the Missouri River and the Madison. And I loved those stories. And I just used to listen to them tell these incredible stories about fly fishing. And I was in love with fly fishing. At an age of 18 years old, that's all I wanted to do. I had a girlfriend, and all I wanted to do was take her fly fishing. And the relationship didn't last that long, but that's what I wanted to do. And so that's what was my passion, was fly fishing. And now I want to fast forward a little bit. I want you to take that thought of my passion to go out and fish the rivers. I mean, I felt more comfortable wading in a stream than I did on dry ground when I was at that age. And so here I am at an age of 18, all growing up with fly fishing, and that's what I wanted to do. Now I'm 42, 43, 44 years old now. Not now, but take my life right then. And I have this desire to fish, and I have these dreams about fly fishing the great rivers of the world, and now I'm married. I have 4 kids, and I don't even have a fly rod anymore because I was broke. Okay, 42, 43, 44, I was broker than broke. I was broke mentally, I was broke physically, and I was also broke financially. Now, I was mentally broke because all the things that I'd done up to that point had failed. Everything. I was a failure. In my mind, I thought I had failed at everything. My marriage was on the rocks. My kids thought that I was a failure, I thought. I mean, my mind was in a position where I was worth not hardly anything at all. I was physically broke. I was over 100 pounds plus overweight. I had a hard time walking up the stairs without being winded. People were starting to take things out of my body at age 44 that I didn't think should be taken out. Okay, and I lost part of my colon. I had a hernia the size of a basketball. All these things were happening to me, and I was physically broke. I was financially broke. I had chased the American dream, and the American dream to me was to live beyond your means. And I literally took that seriously, and I was making this kind of money, and I had that much debt. And I don't mean I had this much money and that much debt. I had this much money coming in and that much debt. My wife had to go back to work. I had to borrow money for my kids sometimes just to pay the bills. It was a terrible life. I hated my life. And that's where I was. How does a person get from loving the rivers of the world, fly fishing, thinking that they've got dreams, and all of a sudden be in a position where he was broke in every aspect of the word? Well, that's where I was. And a friend of mine felt sorry for me. I wasn't very employable at the time, and he decided to employ me out of state. So I lived in this state, and I moved away from my family so that I could just survive, so I could make half of what I needed to pay my bills. And that's where I was. And that was my life. Isn't that exciting? And that's where I was. Now, I feel really bad because there's people that had a lot worse off than I have that I've heard today, but I was in a bad place. And so I get to this place, and it's in the eastern mountains, northeastern mountains of New Mexico. Now, New Mexico, I've heard this before, so anybody from New Mexico, don't be offended. People used to call that the other country. And I was there. And it was a beautiful place. In fact, it had the mountains and the rivers and the lakes that I absolutely adored. And I was working about 10 hours a day, but I'd take some time off, and I found a hand-me-down fly rod, and the resort that I was working at had a private lake, and I started to fish again. One of my passions, I started to just get out on the lake and just start cast my rod. And what happened was all of those childhood memories started to well up inside of me. And I started to think to myself, what in the world happened? Why am I in this place? Why am I living 10-hour drive away from my family? Why am I broke? And I started to think about this concept and this idea. How close am I? I got 4 more minutes. Okay, I'll hurry. Okay, that's it. See you, bye. No. What happened was I got in a position where I started to listen to some tapes and some CDs. And I listened to this guy that said that you can change your situation. I don't even know who it was, but it was a tape. And all he said was, you can change your situation within a 5-year period of time if you'll just change your direction. And I remember rewinding that and rewinding it and rewinding it and listening to it. So all I had to do was just change my direction. So that's what I did. Here I was, stuck into this direction, and all I did was started changing a few things in my life. One of the things is my thoughts. I started putting things in my head that were not negative. The other thing is I started an exercise program. Really elementary. It was walking every day. And the next thing is I started to realize is that I wasn't too good with my finances, so I started to get help. And all of a sudden I changed a little bit. And I changed a little bit. And I changed a little bit. And a little bit. And pretty soon I found myself away from this situation, and I was over here. So just a little bit of change created a change in my direction. And what happened was my mental stability became stable. My physical being, I lost over 60 pounds and have kept it off. And my finances changed dramatically. I got out of debt, became financially free. And all of a sudden, I was in a position where I was actually happy with my life. Now, what does that have to do with fishing? You see, now I can take my rod. I've got 5 or 6 of them now. And I go fly fishing every single day in the summer. Do I not, those who know me? That's what I do. And I fly fish the great rivers of the world. A few years ago, I wrote down 117 rivers that I want to fly fish before I die. And I've got about 12 of them knocked out of the way. And that's where I've headed with my life, just because a little change in direction. So that's all I have to say today. Thank you for taking